the biggest difficulties that you have encountered so far with Compose?
About the modifiers, they also, I found them ugly the way I write them, but whenever I try to make them beautiful, I'm like, okay, what the hell, the circle turned into a rectangle. I just switched some modifiers. What happened there? So it is also something that I still don't know. I just add some modifiers, I press build, and I pray that it would be the right order that I added the modifiers.
Okay, so we are at the end of the first day, and we are ending with Jetpack Compose. And since most of you haven't had their talk yet, I'm asking you to do a brief introduction of yourself, and then we are going to start. Who is going to start?
I have the mic here already, so should I? Hello. Hi, I'm Puyan. I come from Berlin. I work in Romeo. It's a gay dating app, and I'm gonna talk about navigation Compose and how to use it in a project that hasn't built upon Compose, like every other project, I guess. Yeah, I'm gonna be talking more about it tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Ellie Gehad, and I work as an Android engineer. I'm based in Berlin. I work for Zalando. And I mainly work for Zalando Lounge, and if for Italians or people who live in Italy, it's Privé. What else? And yeah, my talk tomorrow. Okay, so my talk tomorrow is going to be about Jetpack Hilt, dependency injection. It's going to be introductory, so if some people are still looking into the idea of migrating to it, maybe you could join. And that's all, thank you.
Hi, I'm Marco Zanetti. I work in Synesthesia as an Android developer. These days I'm here as a host of the Sala 150, but the other days of the year I am developer and I am facing the struggles of Jetpack Compose, so I'm talking about that today.
Hey, my name is Márton. I'm a developer advocate at JetBrains, where I'm working on Kotlin multi-platform stuff. And what else? I need to plug my talk. So I'll be talking about Compose API design guidelines tomorrow at not sure what time, but in this room and sometime before lunch.
They already have the mic, so...
Could everyone hear me?
Okay. Yeah.
I am Martin's friend, and I'm a Google developer expert in Kotlin and Android. I work at Cash App. I'm giving a keynote tomorrow on on Kotlin multi-platform with Compose.
Hi, I'm Emily, and I gave a talk this morning, so if you missed it, it was awesome, and you totally missed out. And if you were there, just go with that narrative. So I just got added to this panel, so thank you for having me. And I'm very excited because like 6 years ago when we were working on large screens in Chrome OS, we were like, we need to improve the view system. We need this and we need this and we need this. And like Compose is the answer to that. And we're in this beautiful moment where it's emerging and it's messy and wonderful. So.
Okay, thank you guys. So let's start with your experience with Compose. How many of you are using Compose in production application? When did you start using it?
Really? Okay, so we don't use Compose for production.
Okay.
That was not a joke, that is true. And I don't know why I'm here, but apparently because I do post a lot of content about Jetpack Compose and Jetpack Hilt and like all the Jetpack libraries thing.
And then there's the reality.
So I think that's why I was invited here.
Okay.
You want to go next?
Well, we are using Compose, surprisingly. And yeah. We started using Compose around a year ago. It hasn't been even a year, so we were kind of late to the party. And our project is like 6 years old probably, so it is hard. It's like putting an Lamborghini engine into some Fiat 500 something. But yeah, the first impression is a lot of experimental APIs and a lot of libraries in beta and alpha versions, which is taking a lot of resources, a lot of time to keep them up to date and actually keep up with the changes that is happening. So yeah, the first impression was experimental APIs, which I can rant about the whole day, but I'm gonna save them for tomorrow.
Anybody else?
I do not work on production applications. But I have shipped Compose to production before. I've worked on an SDK built on Compose. I think we started right before it became stable, so we were still building on even more experimental things than what the case is now. And yeah, I've always really enjoyed it. We did a lot of view customization, like our SDK was UI and it offered UI customization to the customers. So Compose made all of that a lot easier than the view system.
We use Compose in a lot of our areas. We have a lot of open source libraries that all of you, I think, use. Paparazzi for snapshot testing. We also use Compose not just from the UI side, because Compose is, not just related to UI. So we have a library called Molecule that we use for building streams. So we use Compose we have server-driven UIs, so we use Compose for that. We have a library called Redwood that you could try out. So yeah, we use Compose a lot.
I don't write production code either, but I write a lot of samples. And I'm a slow adopter. I kind of do it step by step, which is a good way to do it. And I just want to say thanks for being the experimental API testers, because we need you to make it better. That's all.
Someone need to do it, so
Oh, yeah.
don't be shy, Marco.
No, I won't be shy. The apps I'm working on are not in production yet, but I think they will be in production
In
soon.
a couple of months, so
Couple of months they must. So not yet in production. I'm proud to be a tester of the messy and wonderful software. I think it's important that the company is on board on that, because if the management doesn't know that what you're using is cool and new and a bit fragile, it can be sometimes tough to explain why something is taking longer than expected. That's
Can I add one thing? Sure.
Yeah.
So just to save our faces, because I mentioned where I work, just really today's morning, and I'm honest, we had our guild meeting and we were discussing having our first Compose workshop in the company. And
Wow.
Yeah, thank you. You can go to the next.
Okay, and for the one of you that are using Compose every day, what surprised you the most using Compose?
Well, I would say, I think the first thing that surprises everyone is that you don't need to create view holders and lots of stuff for just a simple list. And that was nice. We could just do it with a for loop, and it is really, the learning curve is really nice, and it is easy to learn. As someone that didn't have experience with Compose, I actually did some Flutter coding, so it was somehow similar. But in general, how easy it was to create a stuff with was really surprising to me. But how hard it was to come up with a consent between the old code that we had and the new features, it was also surprising to me.
Okay, somebody wants to go next? I want to go first.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, there are some things in the frameworks that when you use them, you feel that they're wrong. And for me, the lists in Android used to be one of those things. And I could never keep in my mind the syntax for all the adapter things. And to not having the need to remember that again is very refreshing. And that's one of the things that is the opposite. You make a lazy column and you feel that it's right. That's the way it should have been working from the beginning. then you have maybe other issues. But to do a simple thing, it works very flawlessly, and that was surprising, really.
I'll be the person who didn't mind writing recycler views. I just kind of got used to it. Thank you. To answer the surprising part, I think for me it was how discoverable everything in Compose was, just through like auto-completion and looking at parameter lists. Like I had to know very little about Compose to get started, and I would just start typing something like I want a button, and I would get a button, and I want to change something, and I would just see, you know, a dozen parameters, and I could start tinkering with it, and everything just sort of worked. He has a mic, so I'm handing this to you if you want it.
This might come back. The only surprising thing, this is my developer hat, not my Google engineer hat. I feel like a lot of stuff goes into modifiers, which is awesome, but I'm, you know, I have some questions about that. I'm like, oh, you know, I just write my entire program in modifiers, and then making the view super easy. So.
Mohit?
I got nothing. I mean, I wasn't surprised. Yeah, it was easy to use. I could talk about the challenges, but I think that's another question. So,
Okay.
Yeah, that's all I got.
So we can go to the next question, that is, what are the biggest difficulties that you have encountered so far, and or things that you need to pay particular attention to? You can go first if you want, Mohit.
Sure. I think the biggest challenge was when you're building a complex UI, like sometimes recompositions would occur, but you want to figure out, sometimes it's hard to figure out why they're occurring. And there are like different techniques and ways to do that. Another thing to know is like, for example, say you have a composable function and you pass certain types like lists, or you don't want to pass in unstable types, for example. And that will trigger recompositions. And there is a tool in the Kotlin compiler that allows you to go through your composable functions and will tell you, you know, what's unstable, what you need to fix. And that's one of the challenges, and that has to do with performance. How do you get the most performance with Compose? And that was a challenge for me in my work. That's it.
I think I said mine. I need to learn more about Compose, how to structure, because I feel like, especially in my work, I have to use so many modifiers. I don't know how to structure my code well, so it's super readable and fits with my brain's paradigm, my views, my ancient views, you know, assembly, C++ paradigm brain, and fits into the modifier world.
So as I started thinking about the answer, I realized that I just had a really good time like onboarding and then using Compose. I really didn't have anything that would have been like bumpy along the way. One challenge was that we did build an SDK with it like quite early, so we had a lot of energy put into figuring out how to design that SDK at that point. Like we did have some Compose code existing out there, which we could look at for examples, but we didn't have strong ideas of like what's the right way of doing something. Like it worked, but like is that how it should be? It was unclear. And as I formulated this thought, I didn't realize that this is my talk tomorrow. So if you wanna, this really is an accidental plug of it. But if you want some guidelines, they do exist now, and I'll talk about them a bit, and you can read them online.
Well, for me, what I see is that I'm kind of a newcomer on Compose, and the team I work in is made of people who are new to Compose, but we are not new to Android, so we have the tendency to put some old habits into the new framework. And even though you read the documentation, you make a lot of stuff, but then when you are like in a hurry, you make mistakes, and you fall back to the old habits, and sometimes make things much more complicated than they should be. And also, being everything in Kotlin, it means that we are much freer to write things the way we want, which is cool. But if you don't have a standard, I write code in my way, you in your way, you in your way, and when we read each other's code in the same project, it can be hard to understand each other's code, which wasn't much the case on the views. It was on everything else, but on the views, you could be fairly sure that you were going to read something understandable at first sight. And that's something that makes things a bit harder. It's easy to write something fast, but that code is not for sure being readable by your colleagues.
So when I started Compose, I had a couple of struggles understanding why the heck am I doing this? Like, why really? Like, why really do I have to use like remember saveable, and why do I have to deal with the states, and like why does that composable have to be stateless, and why is everything in the same file, and the whole long list of modifier thing, and like, oh my god, like how long is that gonna go, you know? And breaking up like all the big components. Okay, so if I have this very simple XML file that I created, and I know how to deal with it. So I have to take every part of it and put it outside as a single composable, and then have to, okay, every time I need to see, okay, so do we have this composable or not, so that we can reuse it, right? And then after a while, I started getting the hang of it. I started getting why do we need, actually why is it helpful to have the composable stateless, and how also talking about like how you fall back to the mistakes that, or the way that you were using before. It's also when you start making them stateful when you don't really have to, so they're not reusable anymore, so you're kind of just like, I just forgot the English word, but anyway, so it's just like you're just not using it how it should be used. And then one thing, I found also that everything doesn't have to be in the same file, because my trauma came from Dart and Flutter, and I'm sorry if there are any Flutter developers here, I'm so not pro it. But the idea is like when I first started Flutter, I was like, this like means, okay, I don't want to use something wrong here. So. Okay, this is me. I always speak what is on my mind, okay, and on my brain. But I just found out like you can divide things and you can put everything in the right place. This is just the beginning. So in the beginning, if this confuses anybody, or if you're about to start with it, just go with the flow and trust the process, like they say. And then you will get the hang of it. Just don't give up early.
Okay.
Okay, you have
I guess, yeah. What was the question again? Sorry.
The biggest difficulties that you have encountered so far with Compose?
Well, yeah, as it was mentioned, recompositions. Our team became obsessed with recompositions. I mean, some of them should happen, but we reached a point that we're like, okay, 2 recompositions. How can we avoid that? And it was unhealthy. So it took some time that we were like, okay, let some of them keep happening. And the next thing about the modifiers, I found them ugly the way I write them, but whenever I try to make them beautiful, I'm like, okay, what the hell, the circle turned into a rectangle. I just switched some modifiers. What happened there? So it is also something that I still don't know. I just add some modifiers, I press build, and I pray that it would be the right order that I added the modifiers. So, yeah, that was it.
Okay, and talking about difficulties, are there things that you wish you had known better before start using Compose?
Should I start? More patience, okay. I guess, and yeah, that's all.
Adding to the patience point, because I'm not so patient, having read enough about managing the states, because I just like dive in and like I'm setting this text or like to have this value and it's not reading it, and I was like, okay, I have to now add this mutable state of, and then I have to add this remember, and this like this whole thing. So maybe this is something, if I could, like it was there documented and I just could have written it. So please read the documentation.
I could have.
Before using Compose, I had the feeling that it was advertised as something easy to use to free yourself from the chains of the XML. And I think it's not the case. And it's not the case because the purpose to me seems to be not to make things easier, but to make things more flexible. Because Emily this morning was talking about how it can be useful for large screens. We had to talk about accessibility. We had to talk about UI testing. UI testing with XMLs was painful. Now it's much less painful. And so there are a lot of things, it seems to me, around Compose, which became much, much easier. The simple part of creating a view, it's actually simpler, but not the first time you make it, because you need to learn a lot of new concepts. So that's something that I wish I knew, I known before, because these things like the large screens is not something that you see every day. So that can motivate you in changing your approach and the tools, but if you don't know, you can think, why am I doing this?
I don't know.
What are you doing?
Awkward silence.
No, I got something. Let me put it in words. Okay. So the question was, are there things that I wish I knew? Well, the journey wouldn't have been the same if I knew now. I mean, when you start out, you won't know everything. So just a learning process. So when I used to work at a dating app company, and I recommend that you should work at a dating app at some point. So, and they did not use Compose at all. And they started to convert pieces of their app. And one of the important things to have when you're starting to convert things to Compose, to start to think about building a design system. Think about building common set of components like styles and themes. And that goes a long way as you start to build new features and use reusable components. And learning about design systems, that was important. And the other thing about using Compose is that when people use the word Compose, they just think about Compose UI. But there's a difference between Compose UI and Compose. The underlying technology is just a compiler, just a technology that knows how to deal with a tree. And you could use that in so many different ways. Compose UI is just an example. And I learned about how could you use it in other different ways. So, for example, you could use it to build like streams, for example, for state flows, for example. And that's about it. So it's just been a journey. Was that a good answer? I don't know. How about you go next?
It's a great answer. I have a bit of a meta response. I think as speaking for all of DevRel at Google, which I probably don't have the right to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. I don't think we expected developers to be so hungry for Compose, because there's like kind of a core of engineers that are like, declarative programming makes sense. So just declare a view, and then if we need an XML file, that's great. And in my brain, that works great too. But speaking with devs, like large screens, of course, but testing devs and designers, I think we're really asking for something different than views. An engineer makes sense. Oh, I write a text view, and then I do this on it, and I do this on it. And designers were like, that's not how our world works. And we need something different. And so I think, Compose, obviously lots of people are really invested in Compose at Google, and we came out with it. I think we thought the uptake would be a little bit slower, but then like all the questions at I/O, all the questions at Android Developer Conference, and like how many talks are on Compose at Droidcon? It's amazing. So.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone wanted something new, but I have to ask this question. Do you miss something about XMLs, databinding, findViewById, the good old views?
No, of course. Like, am I gonna miss the errors like view not found? No, who's gonna miss that? But okay, let's talk about being nostalgic about like the old things or the things that we're used to. this is something that happens with every new technology that comes up. So it was also the same thing. And I just want to add something. Before we become so hungry for Compose, you were pushing it in every conference, like tens. Yeah, like tens of talks about it.
Doesn't mean you listen to it.
No, but we got really hungry for it. That is true, because it really helped and solved a lot of problems. So what I was saying is that when first we were using Java, remember those days, guys? Or is somebody still using them? Other than the guys who did the talk today for, for the architecture. He has a still project, which is still in Java, so good luck. Anyway, so when we were moving from Java to Kotlin, it was still feeling so heavy, and like, oh, do I really have to? But like, Google was so pushing for it again. And at the end, we got used to it. So I think by experience and by like the time, we get to understand that we should let go the old things, and and then we should adopt the new technologies, and also not just adopt them for the sake of adopting them, just when you need them. And that is all.
Don't need to look back.
Yeah, the only thing that I miss about XML is that you always knew that you can find every view element in the relevant XML. That's the only thing I miss. Right now with Compose, it's like we just need to hope that every dev is in a good mood and creates the composables in a nice way, and you can find them easily. So yeah, that's what I miss.
Actually, I don't miss anything from the XML days. And I was missing the same. That the first thing I did when opening Legacy project was to check the views and look at them, kind of neo metrics and imaging what's going on. And I couldn't do that in Compose. But actually, the layout inspector works so nice nowadays. And you can do as web developers do. Right-click on an item and see in the code what composable that is. So that pretty much solved the issue. You see something and you want to see what function it is. And that's very refreshing. So I don't miss anything back.
I don't miss much, but I did get pretty good at writing constraint layout code by writing XML. I got pretty confident with using that, and I just don't use that anymore. So that's a bit of a waste, probably.
I miss, Martin asked me to ask you all this. What would you ask me? How many people used to use a butter knife? Oh, there you guys, some of them. 1, 2,
use your
3, 4. You got it right here. Maybe I missed that. That was a beautiful thing. Let's see. I made an interesting observation. I review a lot of people's take-home assignments for job interviews. How many of you had to do a take-home? Well, not a lot of people. Because in a take-home exercise, they tell you to build an app. And even though people are hungry for Compose, a lot of people still use regular views because they're not really confident with it yet. So that was an interesting observation. Yeah, I think I hope one point everyone gets confident enough to use Compose.
I hope I get confident enough. One thing I miss about views is because I write a lot of samples, and also my style is when I see a new API, I'm like, oh, cool, I'm going to write a demo app right now and test it out. And I find it's a little slower in Compose. Maybe I'll get faster, but I feel like it's really easy to throw up a clean layout that someone else can look at immediately and know, okay, there's a button, there's a text field, and oh, and you're activating this new API. And I find in Compose there gets to be a little messier. I'm sure it's user error, but that's how I feel, to be honest.
That's true. It's also true that now you can ask an artificial intelligence to write down the code of the test for the APIs for you or for the views, and you couldn't do much with the XMLs. So that happened as well. Now everything is in Kotlin, and for simple apps or samples or proof of concepts, you can have easily something that you can understand if it's working or not. Is it building before it wasn't that easy to understand if a generated XML was going to be a good one or not.
Okay, thank you. And is there anything that you really don't like about Compose? Who want to go first?
Well, there's everything. The modifiers that keeps getting messy, and the way that you navigate between composables, the nav compose. Yeah, I hate that. I'm gonna tell you about it tomorrow. Yeah.
What's the title of your talk tomorrow?
Is navigation compose bad for your health? And spoiler, yes, it is. But anyway, yeah. Well, what was I? Yeah, I find it is really easy to get messy, the compose, if you're not careful about how you're forming your composables, how you mix it with the logic and everything. It can easily get messy. So that's what I don't like about it.
Yeah, me too. I don't like much the navigation and the messiness of the code that we write, but I have the feeling that we are, I have the same feeling that I had when the fragments came, that we were using a lot of things the wrong way and wondering, this is ugly. Then we have many errors of many kinds that we didn't used to have before just with the activities. Of course, because we weren't instantiating the fragments the right way, and also because the libraries were changing and we kept changing the way we should have done that. I feel the same right now. We're on a moving terrain, things are getting better, and so I think it's useful to try and see what's that we don't like and what's that we don't like yet. And it's not easy, but I have the feeling there are some things that I maybe won't like, but many things that I will like in the future because it's obvious that they keep evolving.
Could you repeat the question? Could you repeat the question?
Okay. If there is anything that you really don't like about Compose.
That's strong. Let's see. When I use Compose, I build a lot of things that have to do with gestures, and that's complicated. And I think those gesture APIs could need some improvement. You're a Google person, that's the feedback.
I'm filing the bugs. I'm with you on here.
And dealing with recompositions, you brought that earlier, and let's see, dealing with something that has improved over time is updating Compose versions, and they introduce a BOM, B-O-M, and that has improved. I know that previously you had to keep in mind that your Kotlin version is also up to date with Compose, and that was a challenge. That's all I got.
Everything is beautiful on Compose. Perfect. Okay. And did Compose force you to change your architecture in some way, or you changed only the UI layer?
I thought many of the applications that we make, as you know, are very dynamic, and the architecture didn't change much because I think that Compose is perfect for that kind of applications. Because if you don't know in which place you're going to use that view, it's much easier to do that with composables. And so it was a perfect fit for that kind of applications, actually.
So I did not do any kind of migration in a single app, so I would really notice how different the architecture is. But I could notice, at least when I'm writing the apps in Compose and preparing them for courses and stuff. So yes, there is difference, and yes, there is a lot that you have to keep in mind while working with them, like everything like that we mentioned today. And again, I just want to add like something which is very positive about Compose. Let's not be negative today. It is that it has made lots of things easier. It is faster. It is making it a lot easier to test, to make our apps accessible. There was a very nice talk about accessibility today with Compose. And there is one ick that I had about the recomposition thing, and it was like still annoying me, like, do we have to redraw the whole thing? and like every time the data changes. But yeah, I kind of like drifted away from answering the question, so I kind of have to stop now. But I just want to say that maybe like understanding about the smart recomposition, which is like how the composer works and how it recomposes this, made me feel a little better. So if anybody has that kind of egg, just relax. Anybody wanted to add anything about the original question?
I'll say something. I was looking forward to that question. I wish there was a whiteboard here. So I think that, it has changed the way we think about architecture. So going back to what I was saying, the word compose doesn't necessarily mean compose. There's a difference between compose UI and compose. And we use compose not just at the UI layer, like outside of it, also in our presentation layers, in our presenters. So we use the underlying compose compiler to be able to push to a state flow whenever. So imagine we have a presenter which has like a composable method in which you have business logic, not UI logic. And we use the underlying compose compiler technology to be able to automatically push to a state flow that our view, which is the compose UI, is listening to. So we're using compose not just at the UI side, but also as the presentation layer side. How many of you use the library called Molecule? Okay, thank you. Thank you for using my library. Hope more of you use it. So, yeah, we use it. We have improved architecture, and that has made development so much faster, and people love it. And
We love Compose here.
oh, yeah, that's good. And that's all I got. Do you have anything?
I would just add, plugging the large screen sides. I'm excited because we talk to lots of devs that say, oh, hey, our UI is totally separate from our business logic. We listen to all the talks. And then we're like, great, can you make a large screen UI? And they're like, no, impossible. The app cannot handle it because, we handle half the configuration. And, there's a whole list of reasons why actually they cannot support it without doing a huge engineering investment. And so I'm actually really, I'm excited about this type of paradigm where once the UI is really composable and we're moving to this composable world, like it's actually not that big of a deal to make a large screen app. So thank you, and thank you all for making large screen adaptable apps.
Okay, and
can I also add something? Well, what I believe personally is that when we are using a new technology, especially something like Compose, which I believe it is not at its peak and it is not completely stable, it's from someone from the outside, we should be really slow, and there's a risk and we should manage the risk. So we were really strict with it, and we were like, we are not going to change anything in the business logic or the view models or any other parts of the app. We just want to replace XMLs with Compose UI. So no, we somehow tried to make Compose work in the way that we had, and I'm glad we did it because we didn't have enough resources to do it, to be honest, migrating the whole thing, the whole business logic and all, to use Compose, at least for now.
Okay, and we mentioned the navigation, and it's the only part that I really don't like about Compose. And I want to know, what solution are you using for the navigation part? Are you using the navigation components, some other libraries, I don't know, something custom? I know that you have an entire talk about it tomorrow, so feel free to give us a sneak peek or pass the microphone.
Yeah, actually, I'm not going to say anything. I prefer to listen to others. And tomorrow, 3:15, I see you here.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to keep an open mind and attend your talk tomorrow, but I would say that I have been using, since I started using Compose, and I've been using the navigation component, and I just really, it fits, and it is very easily used like with all of the other, like when you're using or integrating all the other libraries and everything, I never actually faced any problems with it. Maybe I haven't gone that deep. That could be a reason. So that's why I'm going to keep an open mind. But don't say that a lot in front of me. Yeah, I'll attend the talk tomorrow.
Good for you.
Yeah, I'm here for his talk as well. And we use the Compose navigation. We struggle a bit with it, but you feel that it's the right thing with those dynamic apps where you need to build the graph while you get it from a backend, say. So it feels right, but it feels, in my opinion, still too hard to get into it. I feel the same thing could be accomplished in a more clean way as a matter of reading the code, not as a matter of how it works underneath. That's my perspective for now.
Yeah, I just really want typed arguments for navigation. So like that's my gripe with the navigation component for Compose or whatever the library's name is. So yeah, like any library that gives me typed parameters for the screens, I'm really happy with. Big bonus if it's multi-platform.
Let me tell you something. So I'm going to be honest. I'm sorry. I know you're working close. So no, how many people here use fragments? Oh wow. No, I'm sorry. I have. I use a navigation type where you have single activity, everything else is a view. And that type of navigation, building a navigation for that is challenging because you have to build a backstack library, have to handle everything, but you have to think about the API, and but in the end, it's really good. And we have a way in which you could use, like not all parts of the app are in Compose, but you could use a Compose view, or you could use a regular view, no matter what, if you want. And I like that. That's all I got. What about you guys?
Okay. And guys, do you have some question here?
Hi. How much UI testing has improved after you adopt and Compose?
UI testing, right?
I'll say something. I was looking forward to that question. So testing, we have a library, Paparazzi, and testing is so awesome. Let me tell you, we do not do UI testing where you press a button, you tell Espresso. I don't recommend that. So we do snapshot testing. And in Android Studio, the way previews are generated is by using a library called layoutlib. And Paparazzi is a library built by shout out to my friend, my colleague, who we basically utilize that layoutlib. We give it the composable method, and you could generate screenshots for snapshots for different, for accessibility. We have accessibility plugin for different screen sizes, large layouts. And you could test it for different themes, dark theme and light theme. And how many of you use Paparazzi? That's good. Very good. Thank you. That's it. That's all I got.
We don't do UI testing with Compose right now, but what was improved for sure is that is not a UI testing, but it's something that prevents making mistakes on the UI anyways, and it's the previews in the composables. If they're done in the right way, you can have, at a glance, you can see many mistakes that you could have made, and that's a big advantage over the XMLs. That's something, it's so powerful, and it's so bad when you open legacy code and they're not there. It's so bad. I wish some kind of preview was generating automatically when you create a composable, because if in a hurry you don't create the previews, it makes it very harder to go back to that composable later.
Okay. No? Other question, guys? Is there the microphone there?
Hello. Thanks a lot for your replies. A question on Compose performance, right? Like, especially migrating production apps from views to Compose screens. Did you see any performance degradations? Do you see any performance improvements? And basically, do you measure performance while doing the migration in the production apps? Maybe especially when it comes to complex screens that, let's say, had before recycler views, and you migrate into lazy views, right? Yeah. Anything, oh, maybe performance debugging, right? Like, because performance wasn't touched today. Thanks.
So I just want to add something, which is not exactly the case right now because of, I'm just talking about experiences of other people who I've talked to who did the migration. So around like a year ago, when I gave like a talk about Compose or a workshop, somebody was talking to me about they tried to use Compose within the app, like where they have the traditional view system, and the app was directed or was aimed to be used by people, drivers who have kind of like old phones or old Android phones, like older versions. And at that time, that made it more complex and made the app like kind of struggle more. I have talked to some people recently who've done the migration, and they kind of don't see this kind of problem with having both alongside each other right now. But I'm not sure still about like the old Android versions, would it still be a problem or not? Other than that, I think all of the metrics on everything I've been reading, it says like Compose is just faster. I'm sorry, I had to say that. Do you want to have something to say?
Well, in our app, we recently stopped supporting Android 6, and we support from Android 6 and now 7 from the latest version to the latest version. So we don't measure the performance by numbers unless it becomes visible visually or users on older devices complain. And for Compose, there was no visual like drawbacks in terms of performance. So I guess it is fine. It is working good for us performance-wise.
Oh yeah, I just agree. What we saw is that it's just as fast.
Okay, I think that there's another question. Can you pass the microphone, please?
Let me also agree with this real quick. Just the idea that like until you're actually having problems with performance in Compose, like don't sweat it too much. I'm a huge fan of doing this very lazily. Like you can always profile and start measuring once you have something really complex that you know is problematic. But otherwise, like, you know, don't try to make everything like perfectly stable and like everything skippable and like optimize every recomposition, because it's probably not worth it to like spend your time on that.
Just add to what Martin said. I don't agree you should sweat because it helps you lose weight. And I do get into Compose performance issues, but I agree you don't want to over-optimize. You're making everything stable. What we do is that whenever we find certain problems, we create static lint rules, so that like the text style or KT-lint style lint rules that help us to like make sure everyone is following the right practices when they're building composable functions. Twitter or X, they had a library called Compose Rules, and that other people has taken over a fork that you should check out, which has really good, even for performance and for chaining modifiers, it has good best practices to follow.
Hello, thank you very much. I think my question is specifically for Mohit. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, by the way. It's kind of a very specific question. I'm trying to get the Compose tree. Now, I'm not even sure if I'm using these words correctly or not, but for example, like ADB dump says we can get a dump of the view hierarchy, the old view system. Is there any way that I can do the same thing and get the Compose tree? I know that obviously Layout Inspector can do it. Is it maybe that layout lib thing you were talking about before? Or what advice would you give me?
Man, I don't know the answer to that, but I know what you're saying. It's similar to getting like the PSI tree, for example, in Ender Studio, and you want to get the node tree. I think there should be a way in the Kotlin compiler to do that, but I don't know. Sorry, but layout lib is certainly not the way to go about doing that. Martin should know. He works at JetBrains. I'm kidding, Martin. Sorry.
Thank you, though, anyway. I appreciate it. Sorry.
This really sounded like an Android tooling problem.
Other question, guys?
Hello. I wanted to ask something regarding baseline profiles. Basically, we have an app that has over 50 screens. Does generating baseline profiles help the composable functions in any way regarding performance?
Not sure. Not sure I got the question. You got an app with 50 screens?
The question is more of combining baseline profiles with Compose. Does generating the baseline profiles help composables in any way?
Well, I'm not into baseline profiles yet, so I don't actually know. No, sorry. Next year. There's a question for next year?
Maybe there's someone in the audience that that can answer.
I can try.
You want to answer?
Oh, do you know the answer? Okay, good.
Hi. Yeah. I'm Ahmed. I'm an Android GDE. And I actually gave a talk about baseline profiles in July. So basically, the idea behind baseline profiles is to try and make sure that your code compiles ahead of time. So what you can do with your 50 screens, you're basically going to define a path to get to those 50 screens. Or maybe it's a portion of those 50 screens, and the baseline profile generator will then go through that entire journey within your app, and then it will then pre-compile those classes ahead of time. So then when your users install your app for the very first time, those classes are already pre-compiled. They're already there ahead of time. So yes, there is an improvement. In fact, when I did it within my app, I actually saw a 23% improvement. So yes, you can do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hold on. So do you happen to know if there's a delta with Compose and Views? No, it's nothing to do, not really any difference.
Hang on, wait.
I've been looking at baseline profiles, but I haven't been examining it specifically with Compose.
So for me, it was definitely with Compose. I never tried it with Views to actually see if there was a difference. Yeah, I'll be curious to see if there is actually a delta between the two. Yeah.
But okay. Yes, baseline profiles, I think, is the answer.
Okay, guys, we are out of time, so I just want to ask the final question for you. And what would you like to see in the future of Jetpack Compose?
Well, for me, of course, an easier to get navigation would be something that I'd like. And also something like some templating, some way to make, I have the same feeling as Emily that the modifiers take a lot of space and viewable space when you scroll the code. And I think sometimes there should be a way to make them smaller. You don't always want to get into them. A way to get all the code inside the composables or the code of the modifiers, because sometimes I don't care about modifiers. Can I hide them? Maybe it's going to happen in the future, like an Android Studio plugin, I don't know. That's something that could be useful in order to see the code.
It's a nice idea to hide the modifiers.
Yeah,
it can be a good feature.
Maybe with the modifiers to make it like simpler to, and sort of kind of like, you know, when, I don't know, was it you or you who was talking about when like, when you exchange the modifiers, it just like wrecks the whole thing. So if there might be one day something that could make it easier, like for example, now I'm reminiscing about XML that that mostly it's not gonna make a big difference how you're going to order the attributes and stuff. So that might be something. And another thing, I know like the documentation and everything now and the resources are a lot better than when Compose started, but still we would like to see that even more and growing bigger. I think that's for me. Anybody else?
Well, I believe Compose is something that should have came out really sooner, and this is the way that we should do it. So I don't expect, I just want to wait and see how it evolves.
Okay.
There's something I want to add. So there was that library, which was in a talk in Droidcon Berlin, and it was something about, I cannot remember the name, I'm sorry, but it was a plugin. It was a plugin that you could add to your Android Studio and you could add to Figma, and just by the designers collaborating with us and just helping us a little bit, just doing very few adjustments to the way they add the designs to Figma. They could create the components in Figma and it just extracts it into Compose. So that was still like in the very beginning. It was like, I think, the first version when it was announced or talked about. And I might think that maybe if designers, but this is more about designers, you know, though, like if designers would be able to take that extra mile to do something just for Android developers, not iOS. I think, yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Excuse me, just a second. I agree. We were talking about with some colleagues today that sometimes you feel like the designers design and you design again from scratch something else, and then it changes and you do all the job 2 times. So having something that just for changing colors or whatever could be exposed outside, because Figma already gives you some composable basic. It would be great to have some bridge so developers don't have to do all the loop in order to just change a couple of labels. That would be great on any framework, not just Android.
I'm sorry. Does anybody know or remember the name of that library or plugin? Did somebody attend?
Relay,
right?
Relay.
But Relay, they're the ones who did it, but like, was that the name of it?
Yeah, it's the name of the plugin, right? Relay.
Yeah, if it is, maybe. But I remember like the engineer who announced it was from the Relay. I don't rely on my memory, so okay. Anyway, okay.
I'll be very quick. I'm waiting for context receivers to stabilize, and then I want to see some of them in Compose APIs because that's really exciting, and I think it can make things nicer.
I look forward to something that's being worked upon as shared element transitions.
Of course, the modifiers, but I think you said something interesting is like the visual space. You know, in my sample code, you know, I had like 12 closing brackets all in. I mean, I feel like we can do better. But I'm also really interested in what all of you want to come next in Compose. So file feedback on the Compose component, please, and issues and feature requests, because the team needs it.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me on the stage for this roundtable.